Hey guys, today I'm going to teach you all about circles, and today we're starting with circumference. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to identify parts of a circle, find the perimeter of a circle, and you'll understand why that's in quotes, and then you'll also understand the meaning of pi. So go ahead and get out your binder, turn to the math section, and get ready to take some notes. All right, so obviously you know what a circle is, and you've probably seen circles around you every day in your life since the day you were born. But let's go ahead and take this from the math side of things, and we'll get into circumference here in a minute. But let's go ahead and start with parts of a circle and identifying some definitions for parts of a circle. So a circle has many specific parts. One of them is the radius, and the radius is the distance from the center to the outside edge. So if I put a dot in the center of this circle, that's my center, and if I draw a line from any point on that center to an outside edge, any one of these lines is the radius. So the radius is always going to be half of the circle. If you notice, I put a little r here because there is a little r for radius. The distance from the center of the circle to the outside edge is the radius. There's a different word for the length all the way across the circle, and that's diameter. So I used green for the radius. I'm going to show you the diameter in red. The diameter is from one point on the circle all the way across to its opposite end. So if you look here, I can use a D to represent that. And that straight line is basically twice the radius. If I have a radius and another radius, I have a diameter. So the diameter is from one endpoint to the other endpoint. And just like the radius, I can draw it at any different way across the circle. So this is an example of diameter, and this is an example of diameter. The only difference between radius and diameter is that radius is half of the diameter. Or you could think of it as two radiuses equal one diameter. Now, before I show you the last vocab word for circles, let's go ahead and just look at the definition. The distance around a circle. You probably know the distance around a shape as the perimeter. So any distance around a shape, we have called perimeter in the past. However, for circles, there's a special word for it, and it starts with a C, and that word is circumference. So the lesson today is all about circumference of a circle. That's because there's a special relationship between radius and diameter and circumference. So we will get into that in a minute. If you haven't already, go ahead and take a second and make sure you've labeled the parts of this circle. You want to make sure you have radius being half the circle, diameter, that's their length all the way across, and the perimeter of the circle is what we call circumference. So I just used a little arrow to show that. One thing you might see that might trip you up is that you might see a little line across the circle that's not all the way across or from the center. And that little purple thing here that's not a radius or a diameter. That's called a chord. And I just wanted to show you that because you might see that later on in geometry. And don't get that chord mixed up with the radius or the diameter. The radius has to come from the center, and the diameter has to be all the way across. Okay, so let's go ahead and figure out what is the relationship between circumference and diameter. What does that have to do with real life? What does that have to do with math? Let's try to figure it out before I tell you. So look at this example with Micah and his friends at a tire factory. The factory manufactures several different sized tires for different vehicles. We're going to fill out the table below to show how the diameter and the circumference of the tires are related. So we have a toddler bike, a car, and a dump truck, and obviously all those have different sized tires. The diameter of each tire is listed. And remember, the diameter is the length all the way across. So in blue here, I just drew the diameter of all those tires. On the bike, again in blue, those are the diameters. It's the length all the way across. And the circumference of the tire is listed. And remember, that's the perimeter. That's like the length of the outside. So if I take all this, all of that is the circumference. So we're going to set up a y divided by x ratio. And what that means is we have x's and y's here, independent variables and dependent variables. So if you want to, just go ahead and take a second and label. These are the independent. This is the dependent. The circumference depends on the diameter, and you'll see how in just a second. So let's find the ratio of the toddler bike first. The ratio is always going to be the circumference divided by the diameter. So in this case, 43.96 divided by 14 is going to give us a simplified ratio. Remember, that line between these two fractions means divide. So go ahead and take a second and divide 43.96 divided by 14, and then press play when you're ready to check. Okay, so hopefully you just did that by yourself and you got the number 3.14. If you did it right. So let's look at the second vehicle. The second one is a bike, and that has a bigger diameter, so it also has a bigger circumference. Let's set up a ratio the exact same way that we did before. Let's take our circumference divided by the diameter. So I just set up a ratio, 56.52 over 18. Remember, that line means divide, so when I want to simplify the ratio, I'm going to go ahead and just divide that. Take a second, pause the video, try that yourself, and then press play when you're ready to check. If you did it right, you got the same number, 3.14. Now, these are two different size bikes. These are two different size circles. They have a different diameter and a different circumference. But when I took the circumference divided by the diameter, I got the same number. Let's look at it again with a car. There's a car that has a diameter of 24 inches, a circumference of 75.36 inches. Go ahead and set up the ratio by yourself, and then press play when you're ready to check. All right, so the ratio you should have set up, if we're doing a y divided by x, our dependent divided by our independent, or in this case, our circumference divided by diameter, you should have 75.36 over 24. And then go ahead and simplify that. When you do, you get 3.14. This is some math magic here, people. Look at the dump truck. This is a really big one. It's got 36 inches. And so the circumference is 113.04 inches. Take a second, set up the ratio, and then simplify it all by yourself. Pause now if you haven't already, and then press play whenever you're ready to check. All right, I took the circumference divided by diameter, and I got 3.14 again. If you notice, on every single one of these different size circles, I got a simplified ratio of 3.14. You could try it at home. You find any circle, find a plate, go try it on your own tires. Take some measuring tape and use that to find the circumference, and then find the diameter. When you divide them, you'll always end up with a number that is close to 3.14 every single time. That's because the circumference divided by the diameter of any given circle results in approximately 3.14. It's not always going to be exactly 3.14, especially the more specific you are, but it'll be close to it. And that number is a special number in math. That number is pi, my favorite number. So circles are a special shape, and pi and circumference and all that stuff is so weird to me. It's like math magic. So I hope that you're just as blown away as I am about that stuff, because it works for anything in the world, any circle you see. So if you have a perfect circle, you can find the circumference with a few formulas. The first one is going to be circumference equals the diameter times pi. In the last example we just did, you saw that pi equals the circumference divided by the diameter. So this is just a different way to write it. Circumference also equals the diameter times pi. It's an inverse operation. And because we know that the diameter is 2 times the radius, you can also write the equation or formula like this. Circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius, where instead of writing diameter, I've written 2r, or 2 times the radius, because that's what diameter is. So either one of these formulas will work when you try to find the circumference of a circle. And we always approximate pi to about 3.14. Which is why we celebrate Pi Day on March 14th. It's also important that you know that pi is not an exact number. It's not exactly 3.14, because just like a circle, pi never ends. So this is as close as we can get to an approximation for what pi is about. So let's now use our newfound understanding of circles to complete this table below. If you want to, you can go ahead and pause the video now and try this all by yourself, but I'm going to walk through the first one with you, and then I would expect you would know how to do 2 and 3. So pause now if you want to and try them all. Otherwise, keep watching. I'm going to go through number 1. So let's start by figuring out what we have here. I have a circle. I need to find the circumference, and I'm given half of the length of the circle. So from the center to the outside, that distance is called the radius. So I'm going to use the formula where I use radius. The good thing about these circles is that you just need to use a formula. So if you know the formula for circumference, then you're just plugging numbers in. So circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius. I have the radius. The radius is 6 inches. So when I plug in the values, all I did was trade out the r for the number 6. Now I can do that math. Now, if you type this in your calculator and you type in 2 times 6 times 3.14, you'll get a number, and it will be very, very close to the circumference. However, whenever you see something that says in terms of pi, you have to remember pi is a never-ending number that we can't get an exact number for. It's not exactly 3.14. It's close to it. So if there's a pi symbol you can use, or to leave it in terms of pi, that's the more exact your answer is going to be. So what you can do is you can simplify. I can do 2 times 6. So I'm going to do 2 times 6 in my head. That's 12. And I'm just going to keep pi. That means in terms of pi. Now, if we do want to simplify this even further, we can approximate pi, or we can use the pi symbol in our calculators, and we'll get a circumference of about 37.68 inches. Remember, the circumference is the distance around the circle. It's like the circle's perimeter. Okay, so that's how you find circumference of a circle using the formula. Go ahead and try number 2 by yourself, and then press play whenever you're ready to check. All right, so hopefully you gave this an attempt. If you don't know how to do the whole thing, just do the first part and then press play. So the formula we're going to use is going to be based on what we have. So what I'm given here is a circle with a distance all the way across. That is our diameter. So I'm going to use the formula that has diameter in it. So circumference equals diameter times pi. So I'm going to write that here. Circumference equals pi times diameter. You notice I switched around pi and d. It doesn't matter the order of the operation if it's multiplication. That's the commutative property. I can do d times pi. I can do pi times d. So what I want to do is I want to plug in the value. I have the d. It's 14. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in for the d here. So I can write this as circumference equals pi times 14. But in terms of pi, especially whenever you see in terms of pi, they want you to put pi after the number. It's just like math grammar. It just sounds weird if you say pi 14. It just sounds better if you say circumference equals 14 pi. So that would be in terms of pi. But if we want to approximate this, then I want to make sure that I put a 3.14 in for pi or use that pi symbol in my calculator and multiply those two numbers to get 43.96. Now you're not done yet because this is circumference, which is the distance around the circle. It's like the circle's perimeter. We aren't done because we've not labeled with our units. So you always want to make sure you're using the units that they give to you. It's centimeters. And it's not centimeters squared because this is not the area of the circle. It's the outside perimeter of the circle. So remember, it's just going to be centimeters here, not centimeters squared. That's a mistake I see all the time. Go ahead and try number 3 if you haven't already, and then press play whenever you're ready to check. All right, so you should have tried that by yourself. Looking at this circle, you can see that you have a distance from the center to the outside endpoint, so you have the radius. When you have the radius of a circle, you want to use the formula. Circumference equals 2 pi r. 2 times pi times the radius, because 2 times the radius is the diameter. So we want to plug in the value that we have. So 3.5 can go in for the radius. When I do that, this is what it looks like. So I can go ahead and simplify this, and in terms of pi, I want to keep the pi symbol, and I just want to do 3.5 times 2. 3.5 times 2 is 7, so circumference equals 7 pi. And if I want to approximate that, I can multiply 7 times 3.14, or like I said, put it in your calculator using the pi symbol, and you're going to get 21.98 meters. So that's it. All you have to do to find circumference of a circle is use those two formulas. And hopefully you understand now that pi is the same thing as the circumference divided by diameter. And if you have pi, you can multiply it by the diameter to get circumference. So pi is a very special number, just like circumference is special in math and with circles. So let's go ahead and look at this word problem for number 4. This will be the last thing we'll do. Using your knowledge of circumference and circles, read this word problem, answer the question by yourself, and then when you press play, the answers will be populated, and I'll just be going over it. So go ahead and make sure you've tried this whole thing by yourself. Press play when you're ready to check. All right, so here's the answers. You can go ahead and check them. If you got them right, you are good with this stuff. But I'm just going to go ahead and quickly go over it in case you missed something or didn't understand something. So the Ferris wheel measures 40 meters from the top car to the bottom car. That's our diameter. So 40 all the way across is the diameter. And so half of that is the radius. That's how I got 20. So radius is half of the diameter. So I have answers A and B already. Now, when it asks about a car traveling one time around the Ferris wheel, how many meters did the car travel? I'm looking for the circumference. So to find that, I want to use the values of diameter and pi. When I multiply the diameter times pi, I get that circumference, which again is the distance around the circle. And then D is the hardest question. It says on another Ferris wheel, a car travels 100.48 meters to go once around the wheel. It's giving you the circumference. If it gives you the circumference, you just have to divide it by pi to get an approximate diameter. So that's how you do this question number 4 here. All right, guys, that's it. If you made it to the end of this video, please comment your favorite kind of pie, P-I-E, the kind you eat. Today, we learned all about circumference of a circle. So now you should be able to identify parts of a circle, find the perimeter of a circle, which is the circumference, and understand the meaning of pi. Now you should go ahead and go back to your calendar and complete any other assignments you have left for the day. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye.